Is officially ticking. As of February 2025, Nepal has landed on the FATF Greylist. Now, for any nation, this isn't just a bureaucratic slap on the wrist. It's a massive economic headwind. We're talking about real impacts on everything from international investment down to the daily lives of everyday citizens. But here's the absolute most critical part of this whole situation. There is a strict window for exit between 2026 and 2027. The margin for error? Essentially zero. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly what this means, why it happened, and the massive, synchronized effort Nepal has to pull off over the next 2 years to pull its economy out of the gray zone.
Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap. First, the gray list explained. Second, why Nepal was listed. Third, the high-risk financial sectors. Fourth, the three-phase exit plan. And finally, lessons from other nations.
All right, part one, the gray list explained and what increased monitoring actually looks like.
So, FAF, the Financial Action Task Force, is basically the global standard setter for anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing. When they put a country on the gray list, the official technical term is a jurisdiction under increased monitoring. But what does that actually mean for us in plain English? Well, it means they found critical, undeniable gaps in a country's system. But here's the kicker. They aren't just checking to see if you have the right laws on the books. They're looking for real gaps in effectiveness. It's not about what you say you're doing, it's about real, measurable enforcement happening under intense international oversight.
So the crucial point we need to focus on is the immediate economic threat. Being on this list acts like a massive friction multiplier for a country's entire financial system. Correspondent banks suddenly slap risk premiums on Nepali institutions, which means higher transaction costs across the board. Foreign direct investment, or FDI, that often dries up because global investors naturally steer clear of gray-listed jurisdictions just to minimize their own compliance risks. But honestly, the most alarming threat for Nepal is the tight scrutiny this places on its remittances. We were talking about roughly $12 billion in annual inflows. That money is absolutely vital to Nepal's economy. When that cash flow faces friction, trust me, the entire nation feels it.
Moving on to part two, why Nepal was listed, or as I like to call it, inputs versus actual outcomes.
So how exactly did Nepal end up here? Well, if you just look at the raw data from Nepal's Financial Intelligence Unit in 2024, you'd probably think things were going great. It looks like a massive flurry of progress. I mean, they received a staggering 9,304 suspicious transaction reports. Out of those, they disseminated 1,086, which, by the way, was a 75% jump from the previous year. Plus, a highly impressive 19 anti-money laundering laws were amended and passed. On paper, it paints this picture of a system just working in total overdrive.
Now, what's really interesting is how FATF cuts right through that illusion of progress. Because passing 19 laws and filing 9,000 reports, it's just not enough. FATF demands measurable enforcement outcomes. They don't want to just stare at a mountain of suspicious transaction reports. They want to see the investigations that actually followed. They want to see the prosecutions. Most importantly, they want to see actual convictions in serious, politically sensitive cases and the confiscation of criminal cash. Basically, filing a report is step 1, but FATF is grading you on step 10. All right, part 3, high-risk financial sectors and where the danger zones really are. FATF has pinpointed some very clear vulnerabilities in several cash-heavy sectors. Let's break these down. First up, real estate. This one is rated as critical. It's heavily burdened by cash transactions, dual pricing, and practically zero transparency when it comes to beneficial ownership. To fix it, Nepal absolutely has to mandate formal banking channels and set up a central digital registry. Next, the cooperative sector, also rated critical. It's incredibly cash-heavy, often shielded by political connections, and suffers from really weak audits. FATF is demanding risk-based supervision and deep forensic audits here. Then we've got Hundi and Hawala networks. These are rated very high risk. These are informal, parallel remittance networks that totally bypass the formal banking system. That's going to require an immediate crackdown and true digital traceability. And finally, casinos are categorized as high risk. Why? Because of cash laundering channels and the heavy involvement of politically exposed persons. They're going to need heavily enhanced due diligence going forward.
Let's pivot to part 4, the three-phase exit plan, which is essentially the blueprint for escape.
Let's see how this builds over that absolutely crucial 24-month exit window we talked about. Guys, this timeline is an aggressive sprint. In the first 0 to 3 months, it's all about emergency response. We're talking launching surprise audits on those high-risk sectors and kicking off highly visible enforcement actions. Then, from months 3 to 9, the main goal is to demonstrate effectiveness. This means putting actual statistical increases on the board for prosecutions, convictions, and asset seizures, especially when it comes to real estate and cooperatives. Finally, months 9 to 24 focus on the ultimate FATF exit strategy. That requires sustaining all that enforcement momentum and proving institutional continuity, regardless of whatever domestic political cycles are happening at the time.
But here's the reality. Hitting those rapid timeline goals is totally impossible if a country's agencies are all acting in their own little silos. The source material emphasizes that Nepal has got to fix its institutional fragmentation immediately. The proposed solution? Forming a centralized national FATF war room. This means taking the central bank, police, customs, revenue, and intelligence and bringing them all under one single unified command structure. They'd need to report directly to the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister on a weekly basis. Total centralization of authority really is the only way to move fast enough here.
Which brings us to Part 5, Lessons from Other Nations and How to Pull Off a Successful Exit.
Looking back at historical precedents brilliantly illustrates the two main pillars of a successful exit strategy. Let's look at Pakistan first. Their absolute key success factor was doing exactly what we just talked about, implementing a centralized action plan. They built a national task force that reported right to their prime minister, complete with dedicated performance indicators and public progress reports. On the flip side, look at Botswana. Their secret sauce was combining legislative speed with incredibly rapid enforcement. They didn't just pass the laws, they actually delivered the prosecutions. That proved to FATF that they had both the intent and the follow-through, and they pulled the whole thing off within an 18-month window.
So, condensing all this source material down, what's the ultimate takeaway here? Well, it lays out a pretty strict ultimatum for Nepal. First, this whole situation has to be treated as a severe economic emergency, basically right up there with a balance of payments crisis. Second, AML enforcement has to be completely depoliticized. Even the mere perception of protecting politically connected figures will absolutely torpedo the country's credibility with FATF. Third, remember that FATF evaluates hard evidence, like seized cash, convictions, and audits. They do not care about political speeches. And lastly, the ultimate goal isn't just checking boxes to get your name off a list, it's about building permanent modern state capacity for genuine financial integrity.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question as this 2-year countdown officially begins. Will Nepal successfully unify its fragmented agencies and treat this like the dire economic emergency it really is? Or will the instinct to politically protect those cash-heavy sectors ultimately destroy their international credibility? It is an incredibly high-stakes test